All right, sounds good. Well, first of all, thank you for joining us this morning. Thank you for making it all the way out here in the morning. This session is on end-to-end data loss prevention in Office 365 and the other capabilities we have. My name is Jack Kabat. I'm a lead program manager. I've been focused on DLP for quite some time, first in our first set of initial features in Exchange and Outlook, and now also more broadly across Office 365 and beyond. Just out of curiosity, how many of you guys are familiar with some of our DLP capabilities? Just hands up. Great. And how many of you have existing DLP deployments, either Microsoft or otherwise? All right, also a good amount. So in this session, we'll cover a good mix of kind of review of some of the capabilities we have in the various scenarios that have been released in the past, and also focus on some brand new capabilities we've recently announced and some brand new things we're showing for the first time at the show. All right, so in terms of just setting a little bit of a context, you've probably all seen these kinds of headlines and actually seen too many of these. And one of the reasons we're here is to make sure that we can help you provide tools and capabilities so that your organizations are not in these headlines, your customer information is not made available outside your organizations. And one of the core things is collaboration will continue to only evolve and get more sophisticated and more quick. Our thinking is to be able to provide you a set of tools and capabilities that will allow that collaboration to happen in a frictionless fashion and be able to be compliant within your organizational needs. So when we think of data loss prevention, this is kind of just a summary slide of what is our approach to data loss prevention. And there's data loss prevention. You've probably heard this across the conference, and there's various products that focus on various aspects of this capability. So I want to set a context of what we will be covering and what is the capabilities that we focus on as part of my team's delivery of the features into Office 365. So when we think of data loss prevention, it's about helping to identify, monitor, and protect sensitive data through deep content analysis. And deep content analysis is a key aspect of this to be able to target your policies, target your controls into what you consider is sensitive information. Out of the vast amount of data in your organization, only a small fraction is considered sensitive. And we want to be able to make sure to target that data so that you can provide controls around this and not impede users in any other parts of their usage. So when we think of data loss prevention, there's really four main pillars we focus on, and that drives how we invest in the features and the kind of scenarios we bring forward in our capabilities. So it's ability to identify, monitor, protect, and provide an end-user education. So the ability to identify is a core aspect, and that is again, to be able to focus of what is that sensitive information. Clearly, there's global content that's considered sensitive, things like credit cards, national IDs, etc. But also, each one of your organizations may have specific content that's considered sensitive. Intellectual property information, forms that you use that have client data. All of that stuff is things we want to be able to target within the vast amount of information you have in your organization. Next thing is monitoring. And monitoring really covers two main spectrums here. One is the ability to configure and deploy a set of policies into the system that will then automatically protect you as content changes, as user interactions and collaborations occur. We want to make sure that you have a system in place that will monitor and apply policy controls from any content that deviates from your norm. The other aspect of monitoring is just the standard form of auditing, being able to have an audit trail once something does happen for you to figure out what has actually occurred, and also be able to have standard audit capabilities. For protection, protection is really an array of capabilities, and it really maps back to how you think of risk. different kinds of sensitive information in different interactions will represent a different amount of risk to you. Sharing sensitive data within your team probably has a relatively low threshold for risk, so you will likely assign a small capability in terms of how you protect it, things like auditing. Things, for example, sharing across wide in an organization or across groups, let's say full-time employees versus contractors, may have a higher level of risk, and you may want to protect higher level controls. Things like being able to let end users make decisions should they share that information, or being able to, for example, encrypt that content. And obviously then you go even further in terms of content being shared externally outside your organization, where you may have that represents yet a new type of risk, where you might apply different controls, such as blocking, encryption, or whatever you feel appropriate for that level of risk. So this is where the identification of information and protection comes together. And finally, we have end-user protection, end-user education, excuse me. End-user education focuses on, and it has been one of the cornerstones of how we think of our solution. We believe that being able to make your users be aware of what is sensitive information, also empower them as the custodians of that information to make decisions in terms of, do I have a business need to share this data, is core, while at the same time keeping you as the IT professionals and compliance officers in control of who do you delegate that right to. And this, again, is just something we hear on and on from customers, that collaboration will occur, and users are very creative in how they actually share information. So making sure that we can educate them and empower them to make the right decision has been key. Those of you who have seen Rudy's compliance overview session yesterday may recall that something like a recent survey had something like 58% of individuals admit to actually sharing sensitive information inappropriately or with people who weren't the right recipients. That's a huge factor of people who have admitted that we can definitely go after and help educate. And these are the good guys. All right, so let's quickly jump into a few demos of just give you a sense of some of these capabilities, focusing on first the end user experiences. So this is really the end user collaboration and education. All right, so I'm logged in here as Sarah, and as I was preparing for this yesterday, I don't know why it's Sarah and not Jack, but that's a separate item. But I'm logged in as Sarah into Outlook. I'm running in context of Office 365 as a tenant, and I'm using Outlook. It's actually a preview build of Outlook, but some of similar capabilities in Outlook have existed for quite some time. So this is one of our existing capabilities. And I received a message from Dennis. That's from, I guess, a project update from a meeting that I missed. So I'm going to go ahead and forward this to some of my team. So let's go ahead and select Belinda, maybe Bonnie as well. And as you can see, as I'm actually composing the message, there's something called a policy tip that has shown up on top. And the policy tip helps the user be informed in terms of what is the sensitive content in this information. Clearly, I received a message from a coworker. It looked fine for me to forward this to my team. And in this case, I'm just having a notification that I should really be aware, because this has credit card information. You can also clearly see on top that you have full control in terms of modifying and customizing what the message is. In this time, I'm just doing a pitch for the conference, but clearly just being able to tailor the messages that resonate with your population. And again, different organizations will take different tones in how they communicate with their end users. So I can go ahead and send this. Now I have another message from Dennis, and I'm going to also forward this, but this time I'm going to go ahead and send this to Jack myself. Now, again, as you can see, as I'm typing and interacting, the content is being analyzed. And what you can see here is that both the content is being analyzed and the context of the operation. Here, Jack happens to be outside the organization, which means I see a very different kind of information being applied and presented to Sarah in terms of how she should interact. She can still identify this as having sensitive information, in this case credit cards. She can actually report it as a false positive and say, you know what, this actually isn't the sensitive data that you think it is. You got it wrong. And again, this is a right that you provide to your end users. But in this case, we've also empowered Sarah to go ahead and override the operation. So right now, if she tries to send it, she will get a block that the message can't go out. But if this is really important for her, then she can actually go ahead and provide a business justification. And send this out. And this is important where we've again allowed Sarah to have a successful collaboration, keeping her aware of what is the sensitive data, allowing her a threshold of participation where she has to explicitly decide this is the right thing. We will go ahead and audit this information on the back end for you guys to have full access to, but we have allowed her to make a decision that this is a business need for her to actually do this. So that's basic capabilities in Outlook that we've had since Exchange 2013 for the end user education. Now, if I'm continuing to be Sarah, and this time I'm going to switch to actually go to Sarah using Outlook, OA, and she's going to go ahead and compose another message. And in this case, we're going to attach a document, which is a medical form. And in this case, she's going to send it to Tony. But as you can see, she has two addresses for Tony, and she picks the wrong one. And how many of us have done that, or how many people have actually fallen to this? Autocomplete is great. Sometimes it doesn't always get it 100%. And as you can see, as that content is being authored in the same experience as an Outlook, this is in a web experience, the content is being scanned, analyzed for the context of the operation, and providing end-user education. I can go ahead and look at the details, and I will see the same block action that I saw before. Clearly, I have the option of removing the recipient, which is the right thing here, as I really wanted to send this to this Tony, and be able to continue my operation. The other interesting part here is if I open up this document, you'll notice this is a different kind of document. This is not really just looking for credit cards or social security numbers. We're really looking for forms. So this is a new type of classification we've added recently, which allows us to find content that's derivative of other content. We call this document fingerprinting, where you will take a set of forms and you will be able to fingerprint those, and then any derivatives of that form will be captured. And that's highly applicable in legal, in a lot of intellectual property scenarios, for that kind of detections, which goes beyond just looking for specific types of what we call entities, things like regexes or keywords, etc. Anyway, so that was Sarah's Outlook OI experience, and this works the same way when Sarah is using this on her phone. So whatever she's running OA, in whatever view T-narrow, T-wide OA is operating on, she will get that experience. All right, so now let's move on to some of our new experiences in SharePoint. As you can see, I have an email here, and what this is Sarah, I guess last night, shared some content. And today she sees that there is, or shortly after that, she saw that there is an email coming back to her saying that the content she tried to share has sensitive information, and credit cards specifically, it has been blocked. She can actually go ahead, click on that, and that brings her right into the context of SharePoint or OneDrive, allows her to see what is the sensitive information, and again, empowers her to perform the same capabilities of being able to address the problem, where she can resolve it as providing a report as a false positive, or an override, where she again provides a business justification to be able to submit this. And as you can see, if I look at other documents within my SharePoint site here, this is actually OneDrive site, I see that they have these icons. And what I can see is when I click on them, I have other documents that have also been protected. And what this is we didn't just remove the documents. We didn't actually stop Sarah from being able to perform her duties. We've actually locked down the document to a set of recipients, specifically the author and the site admin and the person who last modified it. So that allows the people who have actually provided the sensitive information to make actions, resolve the problem, and once they resolve it, the document permissions will be restored to where they were before. Again, focusing on the collaboration aspect and making sure that that is easy for our end users to perform. All right, so we're going to go ahead and close this. And then also, there's multiple places where you get to see the policy tips. Again, the idea is to be able to get easy navigation, get this in front of users, and get them educated. All right, so now let's look at some more experiences. So here, I'm actually looking at my OneDrive content, and I see the same data as I just did in the browser. So I'm going to go ahead and open some of these files. And I'm opening, this is one of the PowerPoint presentations that has been sent. And one of the things we've done is we've also integrated the same classification engine and the same policy evaluation we have in Outlook, in SharePoint, now into Office clients, specifically Excel, PowerPoint, and Word. And you have the same rich interactions in terms of being able to see that there is sensitive information. You can go ahead, click on this, and in the backstage you see that you have credit card data. You can go ahead and resolve this in terms of providing an override or report it. This is another surface where we're bringing that collaboration aspect to the end users. And the way this works is there's actually a classification engine that is running inside of these clients and provides continuous updates. Now, obviously, you say, well, there's a bit of a delay, Jack. Why not make this quicker? And that's, again, part of our thinking of making sure we don't impact the user's productivity. So we run sporadically in terms of being able to use cycles that don't impact users' productivity and users' usage of the applications. And this is true across the various apps in terms of Excel and in terms of Word as well. Anyway, so this is brand new capability. This is available in some of the latest preview updates of Office clients and works with our capabilities in the backend in terms of authoring policies that are then distributed across the various workloads. All right. All right, so this is a view of some of the policy tips we saw in OWA of what these would look like on mobile devices where you have lower real estate. It's the same experience, the same ability to override, the same ability to get educated on the policy tips, but in a different view. And the idea is to provide this in the context that's right for the end user experience so that the policy tips are familiar, but they contextually make sense of how they behave within those applications. And here's again the summary of what we have done in SharePoint and OneDrive. And we continue to iterate in terms of providing other entry points of what are the common places where the users interact, what are our opportunities to educate those users and give them the ability to participate in the compliance story. This right now covers policy tips in SharePoint and OneDrive, and this is again something that's right now in preview, and we're going to be making it to selected customers, and we're going to be making it available as part of a broad preview within the next quarter. And finally, the client pieces. Again, the same behavior across the three applications, PowerPoint, Excel, and Word. This, again, is available as part of the preview program for Office clients and works within the preview program of the compliance feature that's released as well. All right, so that is the latest set of investments we're making in terms of the end user education. Now, we've also been busy working on the back end in terms of how do we provide an easier experience for the admins, the compliance officers in terms of management. And you've probably seen some announcements about our Compliance Center, which is a new capability for us to bring together all the various compliance capabilities across our suite in one place of management. That's one value add. The next one is being able to now author policies across the entire stack. So I go to one place where I author one policy, I tune my rules once, and I decide where do I deploy them. Do I deploy them into Exchange? Do I deploy them into SharePoint, OneDrive? And as we continue to invest in other places where we see DLP, we will continue to have that unified experience where you have one place to manage and administer the system. So let's take a quick look of what that looks like. All right, so if I would go to my normal Office 365 Admin Center, I can see there's a new Compliance tab. Clicking on that brings me into the Compliance Center. Compliance Center has a set of compliance features that are all brought to you together. And in addition to that, you get to now manage this across the full suite. So DLP is a great example of how you can author policies that are then targeted across all the parts of our service. So let's see what that looks like. So the first thing you'll do when you're creating a policy, you can either create custom policies, which are things that you will start off and define of what these look like, or you can actually use our pre-built-in types. And the built-in types are things that we've invested quite a bit in terms of looking around the globe of what are common regulations, what are common sensitive types that we can provide to you as starting points in terms of onboarding your experience. So instead of you having to figure out of what is really the core aspects of PCI DSS in terms of sensitive content that's applicable, we provide you a starting point. You can fully customize what that is, but you can use that as a starting point. So for example, and you can see when I scroll these are from around the world in terms of the kind of policies we focus on. And this is something that we continuously invest in terms of going broader and also updating as regulations change. So this is not a one-time investment. So let's pick one of these. France data protection. We can see that for this, we will focus on France national ID and France social security number as the two key identifiers that are part of the policies. When we go next, we get to now select where do we actually target these policies. Are we going to target them? We call these locations. You can think of them as workloads. Or we go after Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive for Business. And you can target these fully, or you can actually go ahead and select specific sites that you go after where you will have different policies even at a site level. The next aspect is being now able to see what are the underlying rules that make up this policy. In this case, the policy has two rules focused on low and high count. And again, these are just starting points for you. And it's really to get you into the mindset of creating policies and rules that are targeted for different risk levels. And here we have just two rules. One of them where if any of these sensitive types occur between 1 and 9 times, we will end is shared outside my organization, we will provide a set of actions. Now you can clearly go ahead and provide other sensitive types, and this is again where you have a list of built-in types. We have about 55 right now, and we're adding about 30 new ones shortly into the system that, again, has the pre-configured ability. Now, you can also add your own types, and once you've added them into the system, they will show up and behave in exactly the same fashion as our built-in types. So a rule is usually made up of a set of conditions and a set of actions. So here the condition is finding this sensitive information in this quantity and the content shed outside my organization. And the action is, in this case, the ability to send a notification. And one of the things we've done here is we've also normalized of what the actions and conditions look like across the workloads. So in the past, you had to think of, well, if I block a message, well, that has a certain behavior in Exchange, and it means something very different of what I do in SharePoint. Well, we're trying to normalize these definitions. So again, you have one place to configure this, and the application of the policy and controls is consistent across the entire system. And in this case, we're going to go ahead and send a notification to, and you get to control who the recipients are. We'll include an email notification and a policy tip. So that's, again, expanding on our model of notifications where, yes, we have the rich interactions, and yes, we're going to be able to also provide email notifications in addition to this. And if I wanted to, I can obviously easily configure overrides as part of these policies. Incident reports are something I'll cover a little bit later, but you get to, again, configure as part of the policies. And you can think of these as real-time notifications at the time of policy violations, like it's sent to a destination of your choice. And we'll see later how to make use of these. And on the general tab, just a couple of things in terms of the rule name, description, and the state of the rule. And quickly, if we look at the second rule, it's very similar in terms of conditions, where we're looking for sensitive information and the context of the operation. And obviously, our ability to add more conditions and richer expression is something that we continue to evolve. If you look at our existing capabilities in Exchange, that's a much wider set of capabilities based on Exchange transport rules. Well, the unified capabilities inside of Compliance Center are also growing, and those of you who have participated in our preview program have already seen new actions and new conditions being added in. For this rule, however, my actions look a little different. First, I have a similar notification, but I've configured overrides. And two, I've also added this block access content capability. And this is the action that actually changed the permissions on the documents from the actual users who I was expecting to share to just the document author and collaborators to allow them to fix the problem before undoing the operation. As I mentioned before, the key focus is how do we maximize productivity so that when you're ready to correct the violation, the permissions are restored for the user to continue their interaction. All right, so that's a quick look at our management capability inside of the new Compliance Center. And clearly you can see reporting and other places where we tie in the other aspects of what that are core to management that are part of the entire solution. All right. So again, the Compliance Center, it's something that's been rolled out very recently. DLP is right now in preview to a selected set of customers. So even if you have the Compliance Center, you will not yet see DLP as part of it. And soon we'll be making that more broadly available to all of you as part of preview. One of the things is we're very much interested in your feedback in terms of the kind of capabilities you see in here. And as we're evolving the capabilities, a big impact is the feedback we get from you guys in terms of prioritizing what gets done, and where our investments actually focus on. But with the Unified Compliance Center, you get the ability to do policy management across your suite. The one thing to point out is we're also investing in being able to provide this as an extensibility point where you can import your own DLP policies. So aside from the ones we've created, you can actually import your own policies into the system and be able to configure those and use them as you would our built-in ones. All right, so we covered a little bit about the DLP policy rules, but an important aspect of this is to just kind of focus on how do these work. So policy rules are really made up of two aspects. There's a set of conditions and there's a set of actions. The conditions really focus on two aspects of detection. One is on the content. And the content is, well, what is the sensitive data? And you get to define what are the thresholds in terms of counts. Are we looking for things like entities? Are we looking for things like document templates, etc.? Then the other aspect of the policy rule conditions is all about the context of the operation. And who am I performing the operation with? Am I sharing this outside the organization? Am I actually sharing this between different groups within my organization? And that way you get to really tailor your policies and the actions that are associated with them to the risks associated with those operations and sensitive types. And that's really how the way to think about this. The rules are really controls that allow you to author the security and compliance controls you have in your organization within our system. And obviously, the actions are also something that will continue to evolve. Right now, block was one of the actions, incident reports, auditing, etc. Encryption, for example, a key action that we're working in and will have available shortly as well, will be in that stream as well. And there's the various types of encryptions that we support as part of our investments. But again, what we do from actions and conditions is something that we continue to invest in and evolve. The other important aspect of this is the normalization of how the actions and conditions are evaluated across Office 365 and across the various workloads. And this is, again, something that we're taking on in terms of addressing, so you don't have to worry about. So policy templates, we've covered these we covered these a little bit. Again, these are across the globe. We provide these and continuously invest and update them. You can import your own, either from your own organization. We have a set of partners who've also authored these and sell them and provide consulting services in terms of how to actually author and bring these into your system. And for those of you who are familiar with our capabilities in Exchange, you'll see these are some of the concepts we brought forward that really have resonated well with you as customers. All right, so let's quickly look at how do the flows go through the system itself, and how does the system work from a high-level architecture. So let's first focus on configuration. So we'll have an admin who goes ahead and configures the system. The policies are defined and stored in a centralized policy store, and then the policies are distributed across the various workloads. And that is things like Exchange and SharePoint, but it's also things like OneDrive and also the clients. So what you saw in Outlook, what you saw in Excel, PowerPoint, and Word, those are reaching and reading and evaluating the same policies that have been authored once and distributed across the suite. And we're also working on seeing how to bring this into our hybrid environments, where you get to author these policies and they're also synced into your SharePoint on-prem, for example. So again, you have one place to author this, and you can think of SharePoint on-prem, for example, as another what we would consider a location or workload that you get to configure. So again, you get the promise of one place to configure, one place to author, and then have the benefits of that across your entire ecosystem. So this is configuration. Now let's quickly look at policy application. So here we're going to focus on email as the scenario where the user's composing content. Now this could be also Excel. It could be PowerPoint. Any of those scenarios are very similar. It could be inside of OneDrive performing sharing operations. So it may not actually be specific to content creation itself. Once the content is created, we will do the evaluation in the clients that have been enriched with our capability and provide the contextual user education and potentially empowerment through overrides. Then once that content leaves the clients, it's also reevaluated on the back end. And this is key to our solution to make sure that you're not just protected by the clients, but the clients are really an extension of the servers to provide the rich capabilities. But the back-end servers are the ones who actually evaluate, apply the policy to make sure you have consistent view of those policies within the system. And that works the same way in Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, and other back-end systems that we integrate with. And obviously, auditing is a key aspect of being able to push that information into an audit store and then be able to aggregate that information across all the various workloads to provide you one view of audit information. Because clearly, if Jack shares sensitive information in SharePoint, in OneDrive, that's something you want to be aware of and treat uniformly across your ecosystem. All right, so a little bit deeper of how does this work in Exchange. In Exchange, we actually focus on integration through transport rules. And those of you familiar with transport rules, you'll know there's a very wide selection of conditions. There's about 50 conditions and about 20 or so actions. And you get to combine and choose any of those you like to create those targeted policies of what's actually applied in the system. This runs in as part of transport, which means anytime content is passing in and out of the system, the policies are applied the policies are applied. There's two main stages in most of DLP processing. The first stage is actually taking the content, and if you have any attachments, doing what we call text extraction. So think of something like a PDF file, where we will have to then strip all the content to just to all the formatting to get to the content, to then be able to feed that inside of the classification engine for our decision of what sensitive data is available. So that is Exchange. Now let's look at how this works in SharePoint. And SharePoint has really two stages to it. And we provided integration in both the content processing pipeline. It's really similar to how search works, and also into the content farms and content DBs where the content resides. So the first aspect of this is integration with the content processing pipeline, where we integrate with the crawler, which means anytime content is updated, changed, new content's created, deleted, the crawler will automatically detect this, as it does today for search. It then pushes processing into the processing pipeline, where we've integrated two core components. One thing is we actually worked with the Excel team to provide a new format handler for Excel files. And the reason that was important was the Excel files and the way they were processed by the index were missing key information that were important from DLP detection. So we created a new format handler that runs in the processing pipeline. The next thing is we have a classification operator that works within the pipeline itself that allows us to classify the content. Now, once that content is classified, it's actually pushed into the index. It's pushed into the index into a specific set of properties that are restricted access to very specific applications. But we use the index where you store the document information already to provide you additional metadata in terms of what sensitive content has been detected. So that's really content processing. The next part of this is policy evaluation. And policy evaluation is something that occurs on a continuous basis. And that's looking for taking the output of the content processing pipeline in terms of sensitive content identification, and then applying policies, looking who is this shared with, is this in the locations where the policy should be applied, and continuing to do those evaluations, and correcting and setting the content appropriately within the content databases. So it's really a two-stage process that works continuously once you've deployed the policies to keep you within compliance of those policies. All right, so going through some other aspects of our solution, we've touched on reporting. Reporting is something else that we're bringing in a uniform fashion across the various workloads. So in this picture, I'm not sure how easy it's that to see, but on the right-hand side, you actually see which workload is the violations occurring on. And you can see them aggregated, or you can focus and, you know what, I want to only focus on the Exchange workload, or only on SharePoint or OneDrive in terms of where are the violations occurring. You can also export this data out of our audit store for your own analysis. And you've seen various announcements around that as well. And DLP will continuously participate in making that data be available as part of some of the APIs that are coming and being released. All right, so real-time notifications. We touched on this briefly in terms of being able to configure what we call generate incident report action. And what that is a real-time notification of an incident or a policy violation that has taken place. You get to configure when that occurs and where does it go to. But the idea is for you to have a real-time notification when these occurrences happen, for you to potentially be able to take actions further than what our system does, potentially be able to audit this information, or potentially even use it from a tuning perspective in terms of how the system behaves. So here's an example of one for an email scenario. And we have the content, up top first, we have some information about the mail, who was it sent from, etc. Next is some basic audit data around the severity. The severity is something you define as part of your policy configuration. Was there an override? Did the user claim it's false positive? And again, this is bringing in that data from the end users back into our audit store, back into the incident managements for you to take actions on. Next we have is the kind of classifications that have been found. In this case, we found credit card numbers. There was one occurrence of that. And then you can see which specific rules have been triggered and what actions were applied by those rules. So in this case, we see there was a financial data, a rule that was hit, and then there were an audit action, a rights protect message, a sender notify, and this GIR action. And finally, in the last section, you can see the details of what was matched. This is actually the content pulled out of the communication that was matched, together with underneath it a little bit of a context of where it actually occurred in the document. So that's our real-time notifications. And the next thing we have is actually, I want to bring my colleague BJ on stage, a demo for you guys of a brand new capabilities we've been working on to show you how far you can take what we've built in based on these GIR notifications into making that into a richer incident management system using one of our capabilities.
Thanks, Jack. Let's switch to screen 8. OK. So we've gotten feedback from our customers that these real-time email notifications are nice, but that you want to be able to do more with it. For example, maybe you want to put it into a ticketing system and put some workflow around it so you can process them appropriately. Maybe you want to get reports so you can understand what kind of violations and what types are occurring in your environment, or maybe use it to tune your policies. So I'm going to show you an example of how you can do exactly just that. In this example, we're going to be using Microsoft Dynamics CRM, and we're going to be leveraging this email notification as an extensibility point to plug in there. But I want to point out that we're in the process of working with additional vendors and partners so that we can deliver similar solutions in other systems as well. So what I'm going to show you today is brand new. We've not yet released it, but it will be coming soon. And I'm going to show you a sample workflow for how it might get triaged. But again, these ticketing systems are very customizable, so you could obviously customize this however you want. So let's go ahead and take a look. So this is my dashboard, which just gives me a summary of my active incidents. And I've got kind of two groupings here. I can see up top, let me refresh this. I can see my untriaged incidents. And then the lower list, when it comes back, is some incidents that are in progress. They've been initially triaged, but I haven't yet closed them out. Maybe there's some additional work going on. And I can get a status of how many are high, how many are low severity. I can see how I'm keeping up on my triage. And I can even see the types of sensitive data that are showing up, whether it's credit cards, bank accounts, social security numbers. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of these and start triaging them. And it looks like my colleague Sarah has been up to something. And so I think this is the email that he or she sent earlier today. And so let's go ahead and take a look at what we have here. So the first thing is if I look in this middle section here, it gives me a summary that, you know what, there's 101 credit card numbers in this email, and it went to one recipient. Let's go ahead and drill down. I can see that it was from Sarah to Jack. I've got the subject. I can even, if I want, look at the original email. So there it is. Let's go back. Now, what I can also do is I can go down here and I can learn about the details of the sensitive data. So what Jack just showed you kind of buried it all together in that report. You've got your sensitive data type, the actual ID that was matched, and that context information so you can understand how it's being used. Let's go up here and look at some of the detection information. I can see that this was detected as high. There was an override. Jack says it's part of my vendor team, and it was not a false positive. And I've also got the policy information that triggered this violation, or this notification, rather, let me call it. So let's go ahead and triage it. So looking at the compliance team assessment, I'll pretend I am the compliance officer. So I've looked at this, and you know what, I've deemed this an acceptable business use, but maybe there are cases where it's a questionable incident, maybe it's a clear policy infringement, maybe it's actually a false positive, and I want to confirm that. So let's go ahead and say it's acceptable. Let's put it as low severity. If I wanted to tag this, indicating that, you know, I think something's not right with this rule, I could tag this so that I could later on follow up. If I thought it were something severe, I could do some sort of notification, either to the user or to the manager. I could even do something like escalate it to the compliance team or the security team. So let's go ahead and mark that as initially triaged. And we'll go back to the dashboard here. So this other one from Sarah, I'm pretty sure I know what that is. So let's go take a look at this other one that's lurking in here from Ann Wallace. Let's see what's going on here. So this had 4 credit cards in here. It also had a social security number, had a Contoso health form in here. This had quite a bit. Let's go take a look at this mail. She sent it to some dude named BJ at Microsoft. It's apparently me. Let's see what this message says. I think you'll really like this. Here's what our healthcare form looks like and how much we paid the other vendor. Doesn't seem like an appropriate mail to me. I can go down, look further down, see some of the details in here, the credit card, social security number. I can see the policies that got hit. So let's go ahead and say I think this is a clear policy infringement. Let's call it low. It's not huge. And let's go ahead and notify the user. And actually, one more thing I'd like to show you is if I go down here a little bit further, I can see a history of other cases that this sender has had. So you can see that she's had quite a few. So you know what, let's just go ahead and change this and notify the manager too. So we'll go ahead and save that. And let me go back to the dashboard. So let me show you another view in our dashboard. Let's take a look at some of the resolved incidents. So here I'm getting some basic charting on who are the top senders that are triggering incidents. I can get a sense of overall what's the severity of these. I can also see how many of them are false positives. What's the mix of how our team has assessed these incidents? How many are deemed acceptable? How many are deemed policy violations? What have you? And then the other nice thing is that since we have all these attributes, I can just build various views to go query the data however I want. So, for example, we have those potential rule modifications. You remember that tag that I had? If for some reasons the compliance officer thinks maybe there's not something quite with this rule, either because maybe it's triggering a false positive, or maybe alternatively it's not strong enough, or it's not quite catching enough, we could go tag those. And so here I've got a query that just shows me all the recent incidents where someone has deemed that, you know what, let's look at this for a potential rule modification. I can do something similar with false positives. Take a look at that. And let's go ahead and take a look at one of these again. Another thing I want to show you that you can do is let's look at a different one. Well, we'll look at this one. Okay, so now if I want to go drill into this policy, I can do that. So now I'm looking at this DLP policy. I can see who owns it. Sarah actually owns this one. She's apparently in the compliance team. I can see the rules that make up this policy and the actions that apply. And then down here, what I can see is all the recent incidents for which this policy triggered. Similarly, I can go in here and look at a specific rule, and I can see all the mails that triggered this particular rule, because there can be more than one rule. And so this just gives you an example of some of the richness that you can do. We put together with CRM Dynamics. But again, we're working with other vendors so that we can deliver similar type solutions so that you can basically put some rich workflow and reporting around your policy instance. Thanks, Jack.
How many of you would think this kind of incident management would be a key aspect of your DLP deployment? Just hands up. Awesome. So again, as BJ pointed out, this capability is actually built in terms of what we already have in terms of extensibility, and it's really using our standard GIR mechanism and then being able to build a set of capabilities on top of this. And we use Dynamic CRM, but obviously working with also some other partners who are looking at how to integrate this into their systems. The idea is we should not want to, many of you probably already have incident management systems in place, and we want to make sure you can leverage those as part of also dealing with your DLP compliance issues in Office 365 and not have to yet have another incident management and workflow system. And that's key in terms of being able to leverage your investments and also make sure your users continue to be used to the experiences that exist. All right, so moving along, let's quickly focus on another aspect of DLP for what's called DLP-sensitive search in SharePoint. This is a capability we released in the summer of last year, and it was kind of our first step in terms of having DLP application right within SharePoint and OneDrive. And here it integrates within the eDiscovery search, and we're also bringing this as part of our compliance center into our more generic search capability within the compliance center. But what it does, it allows you to quickly look at what sensitive data exists in your system. And many of our customers have started with this just to be able to quickly figure out, all right, in my OneDrive or SharePoint deployment, what is really the sensitive data? Do I have really any risk as part of this? So let me quickly give you a quick demo of this. And the basic capabilities are, today this leverages the eDiscovery Center, which means you can create KQL queries. They're a little bit, you have to know the syntax. We're, again, working on making that easier through more of a UI approach to it. But right now it's KQL. For those of you who know KQL, KQL is very powerful. And you get to use the full aspects of KQL to deliver this and combine it with any existing KQL expressions. So as you can see, we've added a new set of keywords called sensitive type where you then get to decide of what you're looking for and make those be part of your normal KQL syntax. The next thing is we've integrated with statistics that come as part of normal searches. And then finally, within the basic operations of being able to export or save and preview the results. So let's quickly take a look at what this looks like. All right, so I'm here in my Compliance Center. I'm in the eDiscovery tab, and I have a case called sensitive content. If I open this up, this is using the standard eDiscovery capabilities existing today, and a team who works on eDiscovery, part of our partner team in compliance, has been busy in terms of also enhancing what do these experiences look like and what are the back-end capabilities. And the nice thing is, by being combined together in the Compliance Center, any investments they make, and you should really see their session in terms of all the new improvements they have been making, also transfer to the capabilities here. So in here, we have a set of queries you can define. I have already created one for sensitive data. Once this opens up, it's just a normal KQL query for sensitive content. There's a new keyword called sensitive type, and then you give it the name of the sensitive type you're looking for, and this is based on the built-in types that are available in our system. You will then select a set of sources of where you're looking for, and this is again an area that the eDiscovery team is making a lot of improvements in terms of being able to search across a wider set of sources, provide removing some of the limits and enhancing the scope of the searches. And then today, we're focusing on the SharePoint search. So if you go ahead and search this, you can quickly see how many documents have credit cards within the scopes I've defined. Now, this is actually quite extensible. So there's a little bit of a syntax that we've added to it where you can easily modify this and say, you know what, I want to only see the documents that have 5 or more credit cards. And again, we go ahead and search, and you can see the results have been trimmed to only contain those documents. Or maybe we're looking for something a little higher to trim further set of documents. So again, we've gone down to 6. Now, you can use more complicated queries. I'm going to cheat a little bit and actually copy some of the things I have previously created. And as I said, we're going to provide a user interface for this to make this easier. So now I've basically typed a query that looks for anything that has Social Security number or credit cards within our scopes. I'm going to go ahead and execute this, and now we have 11 documents that actually contain this. But because this is using the power of the index, means we can actually combine this with any data in the index. So if I wanted to easily scope this and say, you know what, this is interesting, but show me only the documents that have also been authored by Sarah, I can easily do this by combining the author field and an end expression into my KQL, and now I see the documents that have been authored by Sarah. It seems these are actually, most of these have been authored by Sarah, but as you can see through the preview, they're all part of this. The interesting piece here is, again, think of this as part of the onboarding of DLP, where you can easily start looking at what sensitive data exists in your system. Another enhancements we're working on regarding this is actually to integrate this with hybrid search. So if you're not familiar with what hybrid search is, there's a session later today covering this. But hybrid search will allow you to perform searches on content stored in your previous version SharePoint on-prem. And what that means is that content will be fed through this pipeline, and you can easily search for content that has sensitive data in your on-premise systems without actually installing anything as part of your on-prem systems. That's, again, another piece of innovation we're bringing based on our deep integration into SharePoint and our workloads. All right. So sensitive content detections. So now switching gears a little bit and looking at how do we actually do the content detections. Obviously, that's a key aspect of our system in terms of being able to find what is sensitive. And as I mentioned earlier, we start off with a predefined set of contents. We have about 50 or so in the box today, and we're continuously investing in bringing more to the market. These are also one of our extensibility points where you, yourself, or maybe some of our partners can actually author content and be imported to the system. And once that content is imported, it will behave and act in the same fashion as existing content that we have pre-built. So if we look at the content types we have today, we initially started with about 50 or so content types, and then have continued to enhance those. And are adding 30 new contents covering a majority of Europe, North America. We have also investments in Asia, Africa, and Brazil, and South America, including Brazil, Chile, etc. And again, this is partially driven by the kind of feedback we get from you in terms of what are the sensitive types that are important to us, and we'll build in those controls into the system. So please keep those coming. All right, so let's focus on the content analysis process. We've talked a little bit about this, but this is kind of giving you a deeper view of how do we actually analyze what is sensitive. And this is looking at what we consider our traditional content detection based on what we consider entity rules. So here you have a set of content coming in. The first thing that will happen is we'll do text extraction to actually take out all the formatting and give a pure text stream. And the formatting and text extraction is specific to each content type. A PDF versus an Excel document will have a very different kind of extraction. So we see the content. The next thing we'll do is we'll perform a regex analysis. In this case, we're looking for a 16-digit number. After that, we'll actually apply checksum functions or other forms of validations. And again, this is different on the different types of sensitive types we're validating, and it's really per their definition. But the idea is to continue to reduce the false positives that would really be something that's a hinder to your DLP deployments. After we've done the functional analysis, we'll actually continue further, and this is part of our research that has found that in majority cases where somebody sends credit cards, they also have a date or some keywords next to it to decide what kind it is. We'll perform that analysis, and only at that point will we conclude a verdict. Now, some of these steps are optional. We've heard customers who say, you know what, I don't want to perform the additional verdicts in terms of being able to look for keywords or dates. Those are things I'm okay with the extra false positives, but in my organization, it's more important to be able to capture all of the occurrences versus actually bringing down the false positives. Well, you can go ahead and reconfigure our built-in rules to remove some of those additional validation steps to meet your needs. All right, so now looking at document fingerprinting. This is a very different way to find sensitive information. And we've already had a preview of this in the initial scenario in OWA, looking for sensitive information that's not based on a specific pattern or keywords, but much more focused on what is the document and how much of the original document is contained in what is being analyzed. This is very popular and has a lot of applicability in intellectual property, in a lot of legal, and anywhere you have standardized forms. Because the normal process is for you to take the normal form that hasn't been filled out, feed it into the system, teach it to detect those kind of forms, and from then forward, the system will detect those kinds of applications. So here's kind of how document fingerprinting works. On top, we have the configuration aspect, which feeds in the actual document template. That gets text extracted, gets analyzed by our system, and produces what we call a document fingerprint. Then at runtime, which is the part below, we will perform the same content analysis on the attachments, on the documents in flight. We will, again, do text extraction, perform the same fingerprint calculation. This will result in 2 fingerprints, and then we will run a similarity function between the 2 fingerprints to see how similar the documents are. And that is how we will conclude that the 2 documents are actually matching and have a verdict on the evaluation. All right, so let's quickly look at what this looks like from an admin perspective. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and log into, this is the Admin Center for Exchange. Go to Compliance Management and see Data Loss Prevention. And over here, one of the things you're going to find is Manage Document Fingerprints. And under Document Fingerprints, I have some existing ones. This is the Contoso Healthcare form, which you saw me demo earlier. I can go ahead and create one of these and, for example, edit it in terms of providing, let's say, additional documents. Well, let's say I can take a patent form. That patent form is then uploaded to our system. The fingerprint is generated and then stored in our Contoso Healthcare form. And I can go ahead and save it. And now this rule or this sensitive type will look for both the healthcare forms and the patent forms. And that's it from a fingerprint creation. Then what else I would do is I would go to my policies and rules, go ahead, find the rules themselves, and edit the kind of sensitive types that are detected in the rules. And just like before, I would normally have in here my credit cards or any of the built-in types. In here, through the list, I will see the Contoso confidential healthcare form, intellectual property, fingerprints. And that's how you bring them back into the system in terms of configuring them in the policy. So again, this will be very similar to you bringing in a custom type where the system, once you've imported into the system, will use them in the same fashion as our built-in types. All right. That was a quick demo of document fingerprinting. All right, so far we've talked and focused on how we analyze content and what are some of the advances in how we detect sensitive information. This next section is quite different. It actually focuses on a new capability for us to leverage third-party systems that have already classified the content and have already made a judgment of how that content should be treated. So we work with, and this works with any third-party system. There's systems in Windows File Server called FCI. Anybody familiar with FCI, File Classification Infrastructure? See a few people. So that can be leveraged, but you can leverage any other third-party system. And actually, some of the existing DLP vendors leverage FCI to analyze their content. Another interesting scenario is around being able to have file servers where users will place sensitive content in different locations, and based on those locations, the content is classified a certain way. So in this capability, what we're allowing is instead of us analyzing the content and coming to a decision, is this sensitive or not, we're actually leveraging the metadata that has been stored in the documents themselves to decide, is this sensitive or not. So we're able to leverage any of the legacy systems you have that have analyzed content and marked it as being sensitive or not, and be able to take actions on it. So on the bottom in the graphic here is an example of how Windows File Server would work, where it has a set of discovery capabilities for sensitive information. It then analyzes the content and places a certain set of classifications on them. Then once that content has been removed from the file system, the tags are applied to the messages, to the content itself, and then we can detect those tags and apply a consistent policy evaluation across Office 365, even though the content's been classified somewhere else. That's a very powerful capability. So in terms of metadata properties, these are some of the built-in types that we support today, and these are actually aligned with both some of the industry regulations and standards, and also are complementary to what's supported out of the box in the Windows file server. But the important point is these are customizable, so you can use whatever properties you already use for classifying your content in terms of being able to then author policies within our system that take advantage of the pre-classifications. And again, it's a very powerful capability to extend of what we consider sensitive, and how can you make the system take actions within our system on something that's been classified externally. All right, so looking at the DLP extensibility points, this covered most of these today, and specifically around custom DLP content. That's something that can be authored by yourself, by your partners. We have a set of vendors that do this kind of work. And you can author new types for things like employee IDs or identifiers within your organization. You can obviously also modify our existing built-in types. Let's say our social security number, where you want to provide higher level of detections with potentially higher levels of false positives. That's all very much within the scope of customizations. Incident reports is something that you guys saw, and you saw the power of incident reports through BJ's demo in terms of what he was able to do and create in CRM using our existing GIR capabilities. Custom reporting solutions, based on our data feeds and logging, we've had vendors such as Dell create reporting within their application for some of our on-prem customers that leverage the existing audit information we generate. And finally, all the capabilities from an administrative perspective are managed through a remote PowerShell. And I guess the one thing that's missing here is adding the metadata as another extensibility point for us to leverage classifications external to our system. All right, so just quickly wrapping up and looking at across the feature sets that we've continued to evolve in DLP. And one of the key aspects of this is DLP is a set of functionality that continues to evolve and grow. And our investments are both in breadth, in terms of how far our DLP capabilities reaches, which workloads does it integrate into. And that will continue to be something that we expand. And also in terms of depth, in terms of what are the DLP-specific capabilities? What are the detection capabilities? What are the built-in types that you guys deliver, that we deliver out of the box as part of your as part of the capabilities to you? And obviously, I'll leave that to you to review in terms of the various enhancements, and this is the top list of things we've had. So a couple things. I'll leave you with a set of other sessions in the compliance area that will kind of complement and cover similar topics. And also in the deck, you have a set of resources from both. Probably the two best sources are TechNet and Office 365 blogs that we do regular announcements on new capabilities and point you to more detailed content. Anyway, that's the end of the session. I look forward to your feedback in terms of what you guys like to see, and thank you very much for your time.